thinking face. Okay, so let's talk about plot chart terms. We've now finished two short stories, and so we're going to look at some of these words and figure out how to apply them to a short story. Hopefully, these are words you have heard before. I'm hoping in junior high, or if you were in the ELD class, I know I've talked about them over the last couple of years at different times. So, plot chart terms. This is a very basic plot chart diagram. That most stories, most TV shows, most books, most movies follow this pretty similar progression. You can pretty much take any story you've ever heard and put it along these lines. And so let's talk about what these lines are. So at the beginning of the story, we have what is called the exposition. The exposition is where you learn the characters and the setting of the story. You get the characters' names, you get a little bit of description about the characters, you learn the time and place of the story. Now, sometimes you won't actually learn like a year, and that's okay. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you can make good guesses, and other times it's really important and it'll tell you this story took place in 1963. Whatever. All right. So the exposition starts out flat. It's boring. Nothing is happening. Okay. Let's see here. I got this, using this program here. So the exposition here is boring. It's flat. It's uninteresting. But that's because it's an introduction. So in a novel, this might be the first chapter or first two chapters. In a movie, it's generally the first 15 or 20 minutes. In a short story, it might be the first page or first paragraph or so. All right. Then we get to the conflict, and the conflict is where the story changes. The conflict is the problem. And we're going to talk about conflict in greater detail later on, but for right now, it's where two forces fight. So you've got man versus man, you've got man versus self, you've got man versus society. There's a couple other examples. Like I said, we shouldn't get it too much into that right now. But where something happens, people fight. And then you have the rising action. Now, this is where a lot of people get confused because we tend to think, top be the first and middle is second and the bottom is third. But remember, we're going on a timeline from the first page to the last page. So if you're going on that timeline, this is still first, this would be second, and this would be the third thing. Of course, there's more than 3 events in most stories, but for the sake of discussion, we're just looking at how those events stack up. And as the events unfold, you get, all right, that's kind of interesting. And then as you learn the characters more, you get, oh, that's a little more interesting. That was exciting. And then you get closer to the climax and things are really getting interested and you're invested in the characters. You care about the characters. You want to know what is happening to the characters. So that's what we call the rising action, as those events stack up and get more and more exciting. Now the top here, this is what we call the climax, the most exciting part of the story. This is the sit on your edge of the seat moment in a movie theater. You're grabbing the seat, you're so excited, and you can't wait to find out what happens. And if someone interrupted you, you would be so angry because you're like, give me 5 minutes, because you want to know what's going to happen. In stories, they've got the climax as well. It's really exciting. You can't wait to find out what happens next. You're turning those pages in that novel. That's the exciting part of the story. The climax. And then after you get through that part, and you maybe stop reading and you find your muscles are all sore. You're like, oh, I was tense. Maybe your palms are sweaty and gross because you are so invested in what's happening. Your body starts to react, especially in movies, maybe not so much in books, but sometimes in really good books. All right, after the climax, the story starts to calm down a little bit, and you get the falling action. In some stories, the falling action might be kind of long. For example, if the climax here is where the hero had gone on a journey and beats the bad guy, and now the hero is coming back home. right? And so that's kind of the traveling back home. It's the saying goodbye to the friends in the story that you've met. It's the we're just about done. So as you think about movies, it's generally the last 20 minutes or so of a movie where everything kind of starts to wrap up and you say goodbye to these characters that you have met. And then you get to what's called the resolution. Okay, and again, the resolution generally is pretty flat. This is usually the ending. It's usually a happy ending or a sad ending. We tend to like happy endings better. It's where the man and woman fall in love and they finally kiss. It's when the couple gets married. It's when the family has a new baby. It's when the brand new treasure seeker buys his mansion and lives happily ever after. Right? That's the resolution, the ending of the story. So, ooh, that's cool. I'm learning these new tools. All right. So, in your notes here, let's see if this works. I've got an explanation of what all these terms are, so you can look back at these. But what we're going to do now is we are going to take a look at the interlopers and how these terms apply to the story we have already read. So, at the beginning, we have the exposition, and we know that it takes place in a forest, and we have Ulrich and George. Those are the characters. Does it matter what year it happened in? Honestly, no, not really. But what matters is that it happened. It doesn't matter. It happened long ago. Frankly, it doesn't matter. We can make guesses based on the fact that they use the Sylvester Eve as one of the words. We don't use that anymore. But some of the words that they choose are probably pretty old, but it doesn't matter. So they're in the forest, Ulrich and George, long time ago. What's the conflict? Well, Ulrich wants to kill George for poaching on his land. That's the big conflict. Two men fighting over the land and wanting to kill each other in this particular night. So, as the story gets more and more interesting, Ulrich hunts for George in the forest. Again, that's if we follow the tracking of the story, that's very early on, right? If the story is going like that, that's very early on as it starts to get more interesting. Then the two meet. They come around the tree. They almost bump into each other. They go, and it's a brief moment, but they try and get their guns up. And as they're trying to get their guns up, okay, the branch falls on them. They both get trapped and pinned under the tree. Okay, so now we're wondering what's going to happen. They were going to kill each other, but now they're stuck. And now they're saying, I'm still going to kill you. I'm still going to kill you. And when my men come, we're going to squish you. No, when my men come, we're going to squish you. And that's all part of that. But then, kind of surprisingly, they become friends. Didn't really see that one coming. And then the climax in the story is when they hear their friends, they hear their voices, and they're like, do you hear that? Do you hear that? Let's scream, let's shout, because we as the readers are invested. We want these new friends to get released. We want them to live their happy lives. We want them to go back home and tell everyone they're friends and the fight is over. That's what we want. That's the exciting point. Now, this is a short story, so the falling action is very quick. In short stories, the falling action might be a sentence, maybe a paragraph, usually very quick. And in this case, it's very quick. As they're both trapped, and they're hearing their friends, they both start thinking, oh, I'm going to tell my men to help him out first. No. I'll tell my men to help him out first. And they're both talking about how they're going to be exceedingly friendly. That's real quick falling action. And then we get to the resolution where the friends are coming and it's not the friends, it's the wolves. Now, here's the thing in this case. This resolution is a little bit unsatisfying. And it's because it's so quick, it's so short. We don't actually know quite exactly what happens. We can make a pretty good guess. But that's one of the fun things about this particular story, is that the resolution is cut short. We think we know what's going to happen. They're going to get eaten by these wild animals. But the truth is, there's not a lot of resolution. It does not say exactly what happens. It's left up to our imagination. So we have some resolution there, but it's also pretty wide open. Some stories will have a much tighter resolution where everything's tied up, and other stories will be a little bit looser. So, again, this is the plot chart for the story. It generally follows the same pattern for pretty much every story. So, you are now going to look at how to do this with the necklace. So, you're going to look at the necklace and how it follows this pattern and fill in the plot chart. All right, I think that finishes that for me. So let's see here if I can do this and say goodbye.